Hello, my name is Sonali, and today I'm going to be talking about the biology behind depression. I think this is a really important topic to talk about because currently in the world, according to the World Health Organization, there's more than 265 million people of all ages who have this disease, and it's also the leading cause of disability worldwide, also according to WHO. So it's very prevalent in today's world, and I think it's important to understand really what's going on inside the body. Because it's not just a phase of sadness, it's actual structural changes and chemical imbalances that are occurring during depression. So first off, what kind of causes depression? So depression is actually more than just a chemical imbalance. Specifically, like to look at the environmental causes, it can be faulty mood regulation. It could be a case of genetic vulnerability. So if your mom or your brother has had it, and then you're more likely to have this disease. Stressful life events such as death or divorce, ongoing medical problems, or even the result of taking certain medications. So it's not just one of these things that cause it, it's a plethora of things. So say you have a genetic vulnerability and you go through a stress life event, then you're more likely to develop depression. So scientists actually, these are the environmental causes. However, scientists now are doing more research and they're concluding that depression isn't just a result of chemical imbalance because it's much more complicated than that. There's actual structural changes in the brain, which we'll see in the next slide, that cause this disease. So on the left, we see a depressed person, and on the right, we see a non-depressed person's brain. And as you can see, there's a lot less light in the depressed person's brain. And this is because there's a lot less gray matter, and there's a lot less activity going on. And gray matter is basically the cell body, the dendrites, the synapses, all the structural pieces that you need for new neuron cell growth. And what happens in the depressed people's brains is there's actually a lack of connection and communication between the neurons. So this results in, structural changes, and sometimes things shrink because they're not in use anymore. So specifically to talk a little bit more about the structural changes, we have the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the thalamus. So first to look at the hippocampus, which is this pink structure over here. The hippocampus actually is much smaller in the depressed person's brain, and this is the area that controls memory and emotion. And the longer the person has been depressed, the smaller the hippocampus is. So this is area number 1 that is affected by depression, and this is the structural change. The second one is the amygdala, which is this small green structure here. The amygdala is very small, but it is another region that's affected by depression. This area, it's associated with emotions like anger, pleasure, sorrow, and fear, and even sexual arousal. So the amygdala, it's activated when a person recalls an emotionally charged memory. So for example, a frightening situation would be an example. They found that activity in this area is higher in the depressed person's brain compared to the non-depressed person's brain. Then we have the thalamus, which is this purple structure over here. And the thalamus receives the most sensory information and relays it onwards to the appropriate parts of the cerebral cortex. But there's a problem in this in depression. It doesn't get through and the links aren't put together. And that's essentially what goes wrong in depression. So now we'll talk a little bit about the neuron structure. So we know that we've kind of come to a conclusion now that neurons need to talk to each other. And when they don't talk to each other, that's when, you have faulty communication, and that's when depression can arise. So each neuron has a cell body that contains structures that, cells need to thrive. Stretching out of the cell body is a short branch-like fibers called dendrites, which are seen right here. Also, this is the presynaptic neuron, and this is the postsynaptic neuron. And then there's a long fiber called the axon, and the presynaptic neuron relays information down to the synapse or down to the branches, and this is where the exchange of information occurs. It's more of not really an exchange, but a linear kind of transmission. And I'll show a video kind of depicting this, and I'll talk over the video. So in this video, we will have we'll see what's going on in the body. So neurons communicate using electrical and chemical signals. So the messages start as electrical messages down a neuron called an action potential, and when they reach the gap between the two neurons, the message actually needs a little bit of help to get across. And this is transformed into a chemical message called a synapse. So this is where the information gets transmitted. So the release of the neurotransmitter can trigger a neuron on the receiving end conveying the message, or it could also inhibit the message, as you can see in this illustration. So this happens repeatedly as, there's more information, there's more synapses, and it makes the information more likely to get passed down. And the neurons learn to pass important messages and ignore the rest. However, in depression, this process is a little bit faulty, like I will explain now. So we know that the release of neurotransmitter from one neuron can activate or inhibit a second neuron. But if the signal is activating or excitatory, the message continues. But if it's inhibitory, the signal will be suppressed. And that's the case that occurs with neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. So serotonin is not transmitted properly, resulting in the chemical imbalance. And serotonin is really important to help regulate sleep, appetite, mood, and also inhibit pain. Research also supports the idea that, depressed people have a reduced serotonin transmission. The second thing is dopamine. So dopamine is very essential to movement, and it influences motivation and also plays a role in how a person perceives reality. So the problems in the dopamine transmission, because it's involved in the brain's reward system, it's thought to play a role in depression. But not only depression, dopamine actually plays a role in psychosis, in substance abuse, and a lot of other illnesses as well. The others that are involved are norepinephrine, and this is the neurotransmitter that constricts blood vessels, raising blood pressure. So sometimes it definitely triggers anxiety, and it's also thought to be involved in depression. Specifically, low levels of norepinephrine cause depression. And the last one is GABA, which stands for gamma amino acid. So this is an amino acid that researchers believe acts as an inhibitory transmitter. So it's thought to help quell anxiety. So basically, when you have too much of GABA, that's when depression would occur. So as you can see, in depression, there's kind of an issue in neuron communication because you don't get enough serotonin, you get too much of GABA, and it's not the right amount of what you need. So for the medicine for depression, they've thought SSRIs are the most effective. And this specifically helps serotonin. Now, of course, it's not only serotonin that's the problem, but that's why they recommend that you not only take this medicine, but you also work on other cognitive and behavioral therapy as well. So the SSRIs treat depression by increasing levels of serotonin. And of course, we know that serotonin is one of the chemical messengers that carries signals between the brain cells. So basically what happens is in the normal person, or in the normal neuronal communication, these neurotransmitters have no problem getting across. And in depression, you see that there's kind of an issue in this communication because they seem to be going back. So this reuptake, so they're back to where they kind of came from. So the SSRIs, they block these areas so that the serotonin kind of builds up here and they don't go back, they don't reuptake. So this makes more serotonin available to improve transmission of messages between neurons. And they're called selective because they mainly affect serotonin and not other neurotransmitters. It also may be, considered to treat other illnesses like anxiety disorders as well. The SSRIs are one of the best medicines out there currently. So as we can see, scientists have found that mood improves as nerves connections grow and there's better communication. So I hope that this presentation gave you a little bit better of an understanding on the biological basis of depression, and I hope that this knowledge can be of useful to you in the future. Thank you.